Welcome to the All About Us podcast show, the podcast where we deep dive into stories that shape who we are. I'm your host, Carl Allen. Today, I'm excited to introduce to you Angela Betancourt, a woman whose career reads like an adventure novel. Angela is a global communications professional with over 20 years of experience working across 5 continents. But what really caught my attention is her incredible 2-year stint in Sierra Leone. During that period of time, her incredible 2-year stint there during the Ebola virus crisis, a decision that required the kind of courage most of us can only imagine. Angela is the founder and CEO of Betancourt Group, a strategic communications firm focused on amplifying positive environmental and social impact. She holds a master's degree in global strategic communications from Georgetown University, serves proudly in the United States Air Force Reserve, and somehow finds the time to be an ocean advocate, avid scuba diver, and dedicated parent. Today, we're exploring her transformative experience in Sierra Leone and discussing something we all grapple with, the importance of taking chances in life. So buckle up, because Angela's story is going to challenge how you think about risk, opportunity, and what it means to truly live. How are you doing today, Angela?
Oh, Carl, thank you so much. What an introduction. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Welcome to the All About Us podcast. Angela, we welcome to All About Us, and we try and reach out and gain different stories from different individuals and bring a different new perspective in life to many of our listeners. Let's start off with Sierra Leone. This is going to be something totally different. I don't know anyone from Sierra Leone. I know it's in Africa somewhere, and I just have no idea or any concept of what it's like there. Can you explain what Sierra Leone is?
Yes. So Sierra Leone is a country about the size of Ohio,
Wow.
in the west coast of Africa. It is Guinea to the north, and it's kind of, so it has a part of, so in the country how it looks like the elephant's ear. Well,
Correct.
Sierra Leone is right in that area where a lot of the hurricanes come out of when we see it like in the map,
Okay.
right around that curvature.
Okay.
And yeah, it's a small country. It's a little bit mountainous in the Freetown region. Freetown's the capital of Sierra Leone. And then it gets pretty flat, but you do have year-round warm weather. It's very close to the equator, so you get year-round warm weather, but you do get rainy and dry season. And dry season, it's very, very dry for several months. And then raining season, it's like biblical rain that falls. It can rain for days, it can rain for weeks, it can rain for months, for
Wow.
some months. And so really it's a rainy season and dry season type of climate with temperatures sticking around is most of the time. The country is a very long history that you can, read a lot about. Obviously, you have your pre-slavery history that's connected to the wider region, and then, of course, you have a lot of stories centered around slavery that happen to be connected with Sierra Leone and that region because a lot of slaves were essentially shipped off from West African coast, and so you have a lot of history there in the region connected to slavery and those stories. And then, of course, it was a British colony until 1940s, and then it became an independent nation. And several years after becoming an independent nation, you hear a lot of this kind of war that broke out in the region,
Okay.
caused a lot of devastation that I think the country is still recovering from. And then, of course, the Ebola virus crisis. Sierra Leone was one of several countries that was really at the center of the Ebola virus crisis that started 2013, 2014, and lasted into 2015, 2016-ish. And so it's a country with a very rich history and extremely resilient people. And when I arrived in country in August of 2015, there were still some cases of Ebola, but at this point, the country was on the down count of the crisis. The international community really gathered together to fight this devastating crisis. And when I arrived, I think there were about 40 cases left countrywide. And it was a very interesting time for someone who had never been on the continent ever, and to arrive in country to meet a team of people whose faces I never saw because my onboarding process was over Skype calls. And I was greeted with people whom I've never met in person, but just had many conversations with. And my original assignment was for 6 weeks, and that ended up turning into 2 years. And it was two of the most transformative years of my life, both personally and professionally.
Okay. What initially drew you to work there during one of the most challenging, periods in that country's history?
Yeah, there's a very non-linear story that I think set me up for this opportunity. And I think it's part of a bigger conversation of how things that seem unconnected and unrelated in our lives, events that happen to us and activities that we participate in and things that we were part of, sometimes seem disjointed, but in the end ended up actually being the perfect thing that made me the candidate that was chosen for this opportunity. But I was in a point in my life in 2014, I was working for a company that manufactured all natural fertilizers and pesticides for the commercial farming industry. And they were sending me to all across South America and to went to Ecuador, went to Costa Rica, went to a lot of places in Central and South America with this company to help essentially enter these markets with this product. And I loved that job. I loved that job. It was such an incredible opportunity to travel, which is one of the things that I always wanted to do, and be paid to travel. And it was extremely challenging. It was a topic that I didn't know anything about, agriculture, but I made myself a student of agriculture. I traveled with one of the world's leading agronomists and learned everything I could, as much as I possibly could, from him. And together we went to all these different places, cities, countries to talk about this product, introduce this product. And I toured these farms, and it was incredible. And it was really a job that gave me a lot of fulfillment. And I knew that this was the direction I wanted to kind of go in. And at that time, I had branched out. I had left working for PR agencies. I had branched out to try to work for myself or be a consultant or a contractor. And I had worked for a company that manufactured LED lights for the recreational boating industry. So I learned a lot about manufacturing and prototyping and all of that process via that company, and then started doing work and that went very well. I built that PR program from the ground up, and it really validated my approach to communications and the work that I do. And it made me very confident for the role that I then had with this agricultural company. And then the company was based in Singapore. They ended up shutting down the US office, to my sadness, because that meant I was out of a job, and out of a job that I really liked. And so it was around November of 2014. And I was talking to a dear friend of mine, who did a lot of, still does a lot of international contracting work in firefighting and things of this nature. But he helped open my eyes to this idea of doing international work, which I knew nothing about at the time. So he was really crucial in helping me learn about this position in Sierra Leone. And when I did learn about this position, interestingly enough, the requirements were they were looking for somebody with manufacturing and agricultural experience that had been to developing countries and could do a communications. And I was like, there's no way that there's that many people that have all of these things that they're looking for. And so I applied. It was a month-long application interviewing process. I was so nervous the entire time, so worried. I had so much clarity that this was going to be the position for me. And my friends were like, you're going to be fine. You're going to get it. It's going to be good. And I was like, I know, but like this, I just feel in my heart that like I can do this. It's a big risk. It's a big, it's big, bold move, as I like to say. And I didn't know anyone from Sierra Leone, nothing. And when I started talking to my friends about it, something really beautiful happened. One of my friends in DC said, I have a friend who's Sierra Leone, from Sierra Leone. Her family is still there. I'm going to connect you with her. And I said, yes, please, please. She is still a good friend of mine. And she and I talked, and she just gave me the full information, lowdown of her country. And she's like, when you get there, call this person, call that person. You're going to do great. And I got hired on my birthday, July 14th.
Wow.
Coming up. Yep. I got hired on my birthday, July 14th, 2015. The company that hired me was based in the UK. So I woke up to this email saying that I'd been hired. And on August 19th, I was on a flight. And it was, I was shaking. I was so nervous, but it was it was a good nervousness. It was a good excitement. And my friend said to me, he said, it's 6 weeks, right? Go do the best you can. If you hate it, it's just 6 weeks. And if you love it, then it's going to be the best 6 weeks ever. And that really stayed with me. And 6 weeks turned into 2 years. So
amazing.
it ended up, I got there and I was to write this communication strategic plan for a very small team at the time. The program had just kind of gotten ramped up, the program there. And so I was going to come in to do this in-depth communications report and strategy that they can implement throughout the year. I did that in about a month, and I presented it. And then the leadership said, do you want to just come back and finish the year and start implementing this? And I said, absolutely. So after the 6 weeks, I came back to the States, repacked my stuff, went back, I think a month later, and stayed through just before the holidays. And that continued a couple of times where it's like, okay, we're going to extend you for 2 months, for 3 months. And then finally they just said, can you just be a part of the program? We're going to get you an apartment here and all of that. I never got Ebola. Malaria, though.
Okay.
Malaria is not fun.
I bet. Can you paint a picture for our listeners of what it was like arriving in Sierra Leone during the Ebola crisis? And what were your first impressions?
Yes. So the flight took off from Miami International Airport, because I was in Miami at the time, through Paris, Charles de Gaulle, and Air France. And then once in Paris, then you switch flights. And I remember arriving, it was in the morning, and it was very emotional for me. And since I was a little girl, I knew I wanted to go to Africa, and I knew that I wanted to go in some kind of a work capacity. I literally journaled about this when I was about 14 years old. And I knew that I wanted to go and just work and help make a difference and just immerse myself in that environment. Obviously, back then I didn't know how, when, where, but it was extremely emotional for me because it was one of those, I did it. I'm here. I've arrived. And, you step off the plane and you go down the steps, and then you get on a bus. And I remember, because to get to Freetown, you have to kind of take a little bus to a boat. The boat takes you across the bay into Freetown. The airport's in Lungi. And so it's not like you land and you're in Freetown. You have to take some various forms of transportation to get there. And I just remember, people told me that once people were going to approach me, people were going to come up to you, people were going to want to help you with your suitcase. And all of those things happened. I remember feeling the humidity. I remember I don't know how to describe it, but it was like the smells of ocean, and I don't know, it was just like this, I'll never forget it. I can still smell it as I think about it.
Right.
Just this like earth and yes, plain fuel stuff, but also like the ocean and then also like palm. And it was just this all encompassing kind of a thing. And yeah, I just remember just being really excited. And then there was this whole kind of Ebola protocol thing that you immediately kind of have to start going into, touching people, this kind of a thing. We didn't have to wear masks, but you weren't touching people coming into contact like in that way. But my first impression, well, Sierra Leone, to begin with, Sierra Leone is a beautiful country. Freetown is, you see it's lush and it's green and yeah, it feels, it's tropical, but it's a beautiful country. So my first impression of just palm trees and native plants and dirt ground and a lot of people and just feeling very welcome. There was a warmth. Yes, it was warm, but there was like a warmth, a welcoming warmth energy.
Your experience going to Sierra Leone is much like my first experience going to Puerto Rico, which I'm relocating to. It's a little bit of a cult. It was a little bit of a culture shock for me, but it took
Yes.
me just about like 2 hours to kind of like acclimate to the environment, and then I was just like, yes, I love this. Can you explain to my listeners exactly what Ebola is?
So the Ebola virus is it's transmitted in many ways as the HIV virus, very deadly. And it really was tragic for the West African region because it just took so many lives. But yeah, kind of spread through fluids, spread through, if I'm not mistaken, I think just fluids, I think breast milk and things like this. It was very devastating for the region, and there were people who did survive Ebola, but it was just very, very intense, deadly virus.
Now, isn't one of the outstanding outer care symptoms of Ebola doesn't it eat your skin and flesh?
No, I don't recall there being any specific instances of that, and if there were, then it might have been connected to something else. I mean, this was like a virus, very internal,
Okay.
wreaked havoc internally.
Okay. Alrighty. You spent 2 years during that outbreak. What was your role in the communication efforts, and how did you navigate the complexities of a crisis communication in that environment?
Yes. And so I was there with the private sector development program because at the time of my arrival, the cases of Ebola was going down. And now, after the country had been shut down, no one was going to school. I mean, it was a shutdown situation. The economy came to a halt. And so the conversation now was around how do we start to recover from this? How do we start to get businesses back on track? And how do we just really kind of turn the private sector back on? There was a very impressive and successful Ebola communications thing that was happening before I got there. In the height of Ebola, we're talking all of the world's leading institutions, Partners in Health, World Health Organization, Doctors Without Borders. That was their whole thing. That was their territory. Communication. My role as a communications manager on this program was twofold, really to talk about, help put together the information, the reporting around what the program was doing, and which was working across various sectors to help ramp up and boost and invest and to help empower individuals and businesses within these sectors. And my role in that was more around how are we communicating this? How are we showcasing the impact that this program is having in these industries and in these communities? And then on the other side of that was the actual process of helping these businesses and organizations specifically with their communications, marketing, branding plans so that they can feel ready for new investment and be investment ready essentially. And so my role as a communicator, and also we helped launch the Renewable Energy Conference, which was the
Okay.
first of its kind ever in the history of the country. And a lot of that was unglamorous work of texting, emailing, and the logistics of trying to pull off a conference like this and reaching out to 149 Paramount chiefs, many that don't have internet, with old school text messaging and working with a team of people to help reach some of these Paramount chiefs. So it was it was definitely a case study in how to reach people when technology is limited and we're very used to
Hmm.
technological advancements,
Right.
and how you really need to adapt your strategy to fit what's possible within any context. And so my role as a communicator was very much around helping these businesses flourish and thereby helping to raise people out of poverty.
Okay. What were some of the most challenging moments you faced while working in Sierra Leone, and how did you shape your and how did that shape your perspective on global communications?
My goodness.
Hmm.
There's quite a few. I think some of the challenges again come with limited technological infrastructure. You know,
Hmm.
you're used to communicating with people in a certain way, and now you have to do old school texting to reach
Hmm.
people. But then there's also it's a different culture and a different cultural mindset
Hmm.
that you have to kind of work around when it comes to things like the media landscape. One of the projects that I worked on was to help transform, and I say to help transform, I mean basically start hopefully laying the very early foundations of media transformation in separating advertising from editorial. Things like this were very challenging. We worked very closely with a leader in the country who was launching a business magazine and really helping to use his business magazine as the vehicle in which to prove a different business model for other media across the country. That was very challenging.
Okay.
And obviously it wasn't going to happen overnight, but it was really about understanding how things have been done a certain way, and then you're trying to come in with this different vision and a different plan. And that was challenging, and I'd like to think that there was some progress made, but these things don't happen overnight. So I would say that was, one challenge is you need to adapt to what possible in that context and not come in with your own preconceived ideas of what's going to work and try to fold and try to mold have them mold around your vision when you have to mold your vision around what's possible for that.
How did your experience in Sierra Leone influence the way you approach communications work today?
Many things. I think one, I went into this opportunity very open minded, but I still found times when I realized, wait a second, am I trying to do this because I believe that this is the right way? Or am I trying to do this and taking into account what's the best way based on the context of what's possible? And I have taken that with me everywhere and continue to think about that today.
Okay.
It's extremely important to look at things as much as possible as an entire full entity, and really taking into account the full spectrum, the full depth of what you're trying to work on, and not simplify it to it being a single angle where you're now really limiting what's possible because of your own view and perception of that. And so I very much think a lot about the context that I'm in and the context of that I'm trying to work on. And having worked on projects in different places, it's extremely important to always adapt to the context of what you're working on and not just come with your own inflexible ideas.
Okay.
Flexibility is key, adaptability is key.
Now, this new communications paradigm that you were creating there, in what forms did that take? I mean, was it television? Was it radio? Was it posters, billboards? What were you using as your major communication vehicles?
Yes, radio is huge. Was huge, especially when I was there. A lot of people still
Mhm.
rely on radio, so radio was a big one. Billboards was a big one. Signage was extremely important. And I remember with one of the businesses that we worked with, working to design signage for this company. And that was just big sign next to a very main road. And so that was really important. But we also talked a lot about, and not just me, but other people that were there at the time, other organizations, talking a lot about Facebook, right?
Okay.
Not everyone can just build a website on WordPress or whatever the platform was. Facebook was actually the main web presence for a lot of organizations, and that's a really big
Wow.
sector of communications of, it's just the infrastructure was not possible for some organizations to just launch a website. It just
So,
wasn't possible. So a Facebook page, a business Facebook page, was the main online presence. And I remember being part of Facebook workshops and talking to people about, not everyone can just go up and build a WordPress site. Sometimes the Facebook page is your starting point, and helping these companies launch these Facebook pages was something that we did. And so again, it was really about not trying to force people to launch a website that wouldn't be possible. It was about what's going to work for you in your context, and let's start there. And so a Facebook page, WhatsApp groups, radio programming, also very, very important. I remember I was on a morning show once when I was there to talk about the Renewable Energy Conference. That was something that was part of, I guess, this multimedia approach. But we also did roundtables and invited people, these paramount chiefs, for example, to come from their very rural areas, because we couldn't just jump on a Zoom with them. We organized a luncheon and we invited them to come into Freetown or to another city that was a little bit more central, because Freetown's on the coast. So we would go to cities that were in the middle of the country and do roundtables and invite these paramount chiefs to come in person so that we can have a conversation, because you're not jumping on Zoom, right? So you really look at going back to the basics. Sometimes we'd make phone calls, we'd send text messages. We invited people to come in person and have roundtables to discuss issues and figure out the best way to create the right types of programs for this conference, for example. And so it was adjusting in that way. And I think about that all of the time. And even I'll give you a really good example. I think an interesting way to probably look at that, and the way I kind of think about that today, is not every social media platform is right for you. And I'm not going to come and say, you have to be on Twitter. You have to be on Twitter, when Twitter clearly is not going to work for you. And so just because I might have some interesting ideas about, we can use Twitter in all of these different ways, it doesn't mean that Twitter is a good platform for you. And I say Twitter, X, whatever.
Right.
It doesn't mean that that's a good platform for you. Let's have a conversation around what is going to be a good platform for you. And I like to think of it in that way, because it reminds me of, as a person coming in with strategic ideas and wanting to implement things, it's not just about my vision. It's about the vision that works best for your client, for the organization that you're trying to help.
I'm going to digress a bit here, and I'm going to fold back into our earlier conversation about Ebola. You stated you never contracted Ebola. Were you ever around individuals who had contracted Ebola?
No, I met, so no. So, I mean, the country did a very good job in terms of what you do in these types of health crises. And so when I arrived in the country, like I said, the number was declining, thank goodness. But I did meet a young lady who had Ebola. She made a recovery. And this was long before I got there. And it was really fascinating to hear, she was in the hospital, I think for a month, something like that. So very, 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 very difficult, very challenging. But no, when I was in country, there was no being anywhere near anyone.
Okay.
Everything was very handled very, very, very well.
Because I'm going back into my medical memory banks and I'm trying to think, well, why would I think it was a flesh eating bacteria? And then I think one of the other major symptoms, as I recall, was a lot of internal and external bleeding.
Yes, yes. There was there was bleeding, was part of that for
Okay.
some cases. Yeah. Yeah, it's a horrible, horrible virus. And I'm just grateful that um, all of the medical professionals and all of the emergency management professionals from around the world did the job that they did.
Well, looking back, going to Sierra Leone during the Ebola crisis, that was some significant risk you were taking. What made you decide to take that chance?
I wasn't afraid of getting Ebola. I never, I always, despite what, and people ask me this, are you crazy?
Mm-hmm.
Because in the news, what we were seeing, especially before I got there, but what you saw a lot of was dead bodies, ambulances, hazmat suits. I mean, and all of that happened and all of that was real. And so many people, lost their lives to this horrible virus. But I also talked to people that were there. My colleagues that I was going to be working with were there. And I just really felt that I could be a part of something and help contribute and be a part of something so much bigger than myself. And I knew I was going to learn so much. I knew it was going to be challenging for me. I knew it was going to this was going to be the most difficult job of my life, and I knew that. But I wanted to challenge myself, and having spoken to people there about the actual experience on the ground, because if I just went by what I saw on TV, I mean, wow.
Hmm.
People were there. People were there. My colleagues were there, and they talked to me about what was going on. My friend's family, my new friend's family at the time, told me about what was going on there. And so I felt safe in going. And I very much I very much believe in that phrase that your comfort zone will kill you. It's good to step outside of your comfort zone. Being uncomfortable is a sign of growth. And I've never been shy to step away from a challenge.
Okay.
And, I've never been one to shy away from a challenge, is what I meant to say.
Mm-hmm.
It just felt like this was the thing for me to do. I just felt it in my soul. And I knew I was going to be okay.
Throughout your career, you worked across 5 continents. How do you approach the decision making process when you're faced with opportunities that require taking big chances, big risks?
Well, I'll say this. After going to Sierra Leone and spending time there and living there, it just validated what I already knew to be true, that you have to, if something calls to you like this, as strongly as this called to me, and you feel that good excitement, the nervousness, but the good nervousness, then you have to do it. You have to do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just approach life as much as possible with that mentality of big, bold moves, because I've been rewarded greatly. Life has greatly rewarded me every single time I've taken a big, bold move. Every
Okay.
single time. And so after that experience in Sierra Leone, I was just like, oh yeah, there's not, shortly after that, I think maybe a year or 2 years later, I went to work on a project. I went back, I had the fortune to be able to go to Kenya for the first time to work on a project in Kenya. And it was just wonderful now to be on the other side of the continent and experience that culture, which is very different than West African culture, East African culture. Just felt different. And the people, but at this point, I already knew people there. I already knew people in Kenya because they had worked with me in Sierra Leone. And suddenly, it just felt like the world just opened up to me more than ever before. And it's been a gift that keeps on giving. And so I always tell people there's many more pros than cons. And to me, it's always proven to be worth the risk.
Okay. What advice would you give to people who are hesitant to step out of their comfort zones?
It is so much worse to stay. If you feel something you get a little twing of an idea, something calls to you. You see a picture of, a Buddha in Japan in some brochure, and you're like, gosh, it'd be good to see that in person someday. That right there, don't ignore that. Honor that. It doesn't mean you have to go to Japan tomorrow, but just honor these ideas that kind of just randomly show up sometimes, of things that you really want to do. If you see a job, you're scrolling through LinkedIn and you see a job and suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, I do qualify for this job. Maybe I should, apply. Definitely apply. Call it intuition, call it whatever you want to call it, but we all get it. And the more we listen to it, the more obvious it becomes, the louder that voice becomes. I mean, it's so loud in me now that, it's super obvious, but it wasn't always. And the more we pay attention to those little things that call to us, even if they seem really risky and bold, it's worth, at the very least, giving it a little bit of attention to say, can I actually do this? What if I do this and everything goes great? What's going to be on the other side of that? It's very easy to say, oh my gosh, if I do this, what can go wrong? I could have said 100 things that could have gone wrong with going to a country I've never been to, on a continent I've never been to people who I've never met for 6 weeks. So many things could have gone wrong. They didn't. And everything that I dreamed went right. Okay. And so it's important to just keep that in mind.
Okay. Now I'm going to go into another area of your tool chest here. Your scuba diving. Were you a strong swimmer as a child?
No, negative. Zero. I was late to learn how to swim. I think I had like an almost near drowning experience when I was younger.
At what age?
Okay. It kind of just like spooked me. And I've always loved the ocean. I've always lived close to the ocean. My mom loves the ocean. But I think this experience, I don't know how old I was, 7, maybe 6 or 7, just spooked me. And even though I'd go to the beach and things like that, I remember just, for whatever reason, I was just late to learn how to swim. I think my mom tried to give me lessons when I was younger. I don't know. It just didn't work out. I didn't learn to swim until like I was a teenager, I think. And I'm glad I finally learned how to swim. But even when I started scuba diving, I still wouldn't say I was a good swimmer. I had to swim for the scuba diving test, and because they were like, swim these many laps. And I'm like, I can do like 2. I'll give you 2. I don't know about 5, 6. I can give you 2 laps. I can give you 2 good ones. After that, swimming is it's an aerobic activity. I was like,
intense.
It's intense. I was like, I'll give you 2 good laps and then we'll see. I also, for whatever reason, don't float well in pools. So they were like, float. I'm like, I don't float well in pools. I can't, like, I'm relaxed. I'm just, I can float in the ocean, buoyancy and salt water, but for whatever reason, in pools, I can't. So that was very interesting to get my scuba certification, because the teacher was like, I was like, look, I'm not afraid to be underwater. I'm not good floating in pools. See, I'm relaxed and I still, go down. And it ended up being more about breathing and chest breathing and things like that to help me. But I'm just not a good floater either. So it was very interesting to get certified with my open water. But I did. And I'll tell you what, scuba diving has made me a better swimmer. I'm a much better swimmer right now than I've ever been in my entire life.
Okay. You're balancing military service, running your own company, being a parent, and pursuing your passion for ocean advocacy. How did you decide which chances are worth taking when you have so many responsibilities? How do you prioritize all of these things?
Yeah. How do I prioritize these things? It changes day to day. It changes day to day, week by week. I have a great, husband and partner. He's a true partner. So that helps, especially in the parenting department. It's super interesting because I've been reading a lot about work-life balance and if that even exists, kind of a thing.
Right.
I've been reading a lot of people's perspectives on this and hearing people talk about it, and I've read some books about it. And I'm more of a work-life harmony person, and it's not 100% go all the time. Some days are about the work. And I'll say this, the newborn era, there is nothing else. When you have a newborn, the newborn is your whole, like for me anyways, was my whole existence. I managed to get some work done. I managed to do a couple of things after my maternity leave, but the newborn life, it's, you have children,
Mm-hmm.
The
Raise,
newborn
I
life is not for the faint of heart. That was, so I think it's just comes in like kind of phases. My son right now is going to be 2 on Friday, and he is in daycare. And
mm-hmm,
so now there's kind of this daycare thing now that he started not that long
mm-hmm,
ago, that's kind of said, okay, now during the day it's work. And so it's more of ebbs and flows. But I think it comes down to, I'm just really passionate about the work that I do. I'm having Sierra Leone, that was really my dream job. It really was a dream job for me. Everything I've learned, the people I got to work with are just brilliant, everything. And so I just feel so fortunate. And it just really reminded me of the beauty of doing work that aligns with your own values and how you want to, the impact that you want to have in this world. And so that drives me every day. That drives me every morning. Betancourt Group, because it is focused on environmental and social impact, because especially now more than ever, I see my son and the world he's going to go into, and I just think about, well, what are my contributions to this world, and how can I align my work with
mm-hmm.
that? And so, yeah, I look to the women. There are so many women in my life, my mom included, that showed me what work ethic really looks like. My mom showed me what the meaning of work ethic is as a woman who came to United States. I'm a first generation American. And
Mm-hmm.
I saw her as a child working so hard, so many jobs.
Where
Um,
was your mother from?
Cuba.
Okay.
My mom is Cuban. Yep, she's Cuban, and until she retired, I'm so glad she's retired. She's traveling now and doing more things. But I saw what work ethic means because of her, who had 2 daughters, who raised us as a single mom, and had her sister, my aunt, to kind of help, because she was working day and night,
Mm-hmm.
hard jobs. And so if I, I have not worked a job as like she's done those jobs nobody wants to do. So
Mm-hmm.
kudos to my mom, because I think about it all the time, and I'm like, was able to, I'm building this company that I love, and I get to work from home, and have such a wonderful partner who supports me, and I him, and you just kind of do the thing. And I want to talk a little bit for a second of, someone who I truly admire, who's a colonel in the United States Air Force. She was
Mm-hmm.
commander of my base, and she recently transferred to Europe. She is a PhD and a pilot and a mom, and was a teacher and a colonel in the Air Force, and has 2 master's degrees. And I just looked at this woman like, how? how? How do
Right.
you do it? You have more than one child. I mean, one child's a lot. You have more than one child, and a
Mm-hmm.
PhD, and you're a pilot, and you're a commander. So there's always, I thought I was doing a lot. And then I met this woman, and I'm like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
okay. And she said to me, because I said, how do you do it, ma'am? How do you do all of this? Because her kids are still fairly young.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Right.
And so we just do what we do. We wake up, we do what we do, and yeah.
Now, it's kind of strange because I think both you and I have the same ultimate goal, which is, ecology and preservation of the planet. I have another foundation called the Acacia Tree Foundation, and I'm dealing more with land and, desertification and battling climate change. But your Betancourt group has to do about water. So why don't you explain what your Betancourt group is all about?
Yeah, so Betancourt Group is a full service PR firm. We work with individuals, businesses, and organizations that are trying to do good by their environment and by the community, and which is, again, all things that really much align with my own values. But there are so many organizations doing good things out there, and sometimes people don't hear about it. People don't know about it. People
Okay.
don't hear about it. And I like to help elevate those stories and tell those stories and ensure that the organizations that should be getting attention are getting the attention that they deserve, and helping them on their journey, whether that's through social media or through media relations and getting stories published in the press, to content strategy, anything that can help put a spotlight on these businesses, individuals, and organizations that are trying to do good things. I want to help amplify, elevate, and just put a bigger spotlight on the work that they are doing. And there's one organization, for example, called Seaworthy Collective, that is an incubator for startups in the ocean space. And through the work Seaworthy Collective is doing, I have the wonderful opportunity to meet startups from all around the world that are trying to find solutions to climate problems and pollution and other environmental threats. And it is so inspiring to see these startups do their thing, and to know that I can help amplify the work that Seaworthy is doing, and therefore helping to amplify these startups is extremely rewarding.